Hey, what's up, Twins fans? Derek Wetmore from 1500 ESPN. The Twins are 5-1. Like we've been saying all winter, the Twins are kind of just a sleeping giant in the American League Central. Surprising start for me. I talked about it a little bit on a video the other day, and we recorded a podcast yesterday, actually. It's like an hour-long podcast, so probably entirely too much. But Phil Mackey and I talked Twins, analytics, Byron Buxton, his struggles, some Miguel Sano talk, and then we also kind of just danced around the question, how likely is all of this to continue? The short answer is we decided they're not going to keep the same winning percentage. I don't think the Twins are going to win 135 games this year, but there are some good signs from the Twins' fast start to the season, and we kind of talked about those on that video. If you have any questions for me, leave them in the comment section here. They'll come up on my phone here, and I'll get to as many as I possibly can today before I have to head into the office and watch today's afternoon Twins game. Before we do get started, let me send out the link on Twitter, because I think so far I've only notified our Facebook friends, but let's let our Twitter friends in on the action too. If you have any Twins questions that have anything to do with the major leagues, minor leagues, the start, analytics, any of that, just drop them in the comment section. I do try to get to as many as I can, and the ones that I can't get to on the video, if they're just too many for time or whatever, or I ramble because I've been drinking coffee this morning, and so I tend to do that, I'll go back later and answer those on, I'll just answer with my Facebook account. If you're not following that, it's Derek Wetmore MLB, and you'll get a response from me on this video. So rest assured, if your questions don't get answered in the first 20 minutes of this video, I'm sorry, I will get to them. Let me send out this link. Okay, cool. Who's got questions? Lay them on me. In the meantime, I'm just going to share with you a couple of things we've been doing at 1500ESPN.com. And a quick thank you to any of you who have signed up for my email newsletter. It means a great deal to me. I send that out a couple of times a week, just kind of updates on the Twins. I have friends who've said they're on it because they like being able to just check in quickly. You might miss an entire game or series, and they just want to steal my thoughts so they can chat about it at the office. And frankly, I think they probably also just want to have another email in their inbox, so when they're at work, they can look busier, and they're just having fun reading a Twins email newsletter. But don't tell your boss I said that, because it might get me or you in some trouble. Just a disclaimer. Here are a couple of things we've been working on the website recently. The Twins getting off to a hot start is interesting just from a timing perspective on the local sports scene, because the Wild are about to start the playoffs, and the Giants are, the Vikings are always the giant conversation going on in town. So even though it's April and really not a whole lot going on in the NFL, that tends to dominate the public attention here locally anyways. But a couple of things that I've talked about recently in videos, in columns, all of that stuff. Byron Buxton, it's got to be concerning if you're the Twins. I tend to not look too much into stats 6 games into the season, right? Like, I think you can kind of mislead yourself if you spend a lot of time, focusing on hot streaks and cold streaks and trying to ascribe meaning to them. I think that, if somebody went 2 for 26 in July, you'd be like, oh, he's in a slump. No big deal. But then it happens at the beginning of the season, and you think, can he play baseball? There's a little bit of that going on with Byron Buxton right now. I think that the angst is sort of on 100, as it was on our Touch 'Em All podcast yesterday. But with that as a backdrop, I will say that it's been a concerning start for obvious reasons. I mean, 14 strikeouts in 26 plate appearances is just bad. There's no way to spin it. But Buxton is also swinging and missing at a surprisingly high number of pitches. I looked up his swinging strike rate yesterday, and there's only one player in the majors who swung and missed more often. That was Danny Espinosa, if you're curious. But I would expect Buxton to start making more contact, just because he's only swung and missed. I say only, it's still a high rate, but swung and missed 15% of the time in his career, and now he's swinging and missing like 27% of the time. That's crazy. I don't think it's sustainable. I think he'll start making more contact, but it's the secondary pitches that have to have you concerned right now if you're the Twins. Whether he's not identifying them or whether he knows they're coming and he just can't make contact with them, I don't know the answer right now, but I charted it yesterday. Buxton has swung and missed at, and I'm doing this from memory, so forgive me if I'm off, but swung and missed at 10 fastballs, 8 changeups, and 10 breaking balls, curveballs, sliders, knuckle curve, whatever. That's a problem. I mean, that's only 6 games. You think about how many swinging strikes a pitcher gets during 9 innings, or on average during 9 innings, and then you multiply that by 6, and it's not good for Byron Buxton. The fact that he's swinging and missing at all kinds of pitches, too, like he's not catching up to some fastballs. And some fastballs that are 91, 92, he's swinging and missing. So that's a problem. But anyways, that's most of our coverage on the website right now is like what's going on with Byron Buxton. I have a 5 thoughts column on it where I talk about Paul Molitor dropping him from 3rd to 7th to 8th in the batting order. So that's something to watch as the rest of the week unfolds and the rest of the month, frankly. I think this will be an extended conversation. And then I wrote about Miguel Sano and Byron Buxton. It's just kind of funny to me that Miguel Sano is showing good signs with the bat, and he's had a problematic start to the season with his glove. Byron Buxton, the exact opposite of that. He's been great in center field, but you watch him hit, and you wonder how long can the Twins keep that in the lineup. So I see a couple questions starting to come in, and I'll answer those now. Please, if you have any and you're watching this video, just drop them in the comment section. It looks like we might be a little slow today with having an off day yesterday. So drop any questions or comments or observations or criticisms, anything in the comment section. I'll get to as many as I can. Craig Hagan asks, if Park comes up not due to somebody getting injured, who goes down? Good question. A pitcher, Danny Santana, Grossman. Well, actually, it's funny that you mentioned that because ByungHo Park, as we speak, is just being added to the disabled list in the minor leagues. Just wrote a column on that like within the last hour. ByungHo Park strained his right hamstring, according to Rochester Red Wings PR guy, and that's disappointing. I mean, ByungHo Park had a good spring training. There were a lot of people surprised that he didn't make the roster. Frankly, I wasn't. I had projected all along that he was going to start the season in the minor leagues, and a hot spring training didn't really do a whole lot to change my opinion on that. I realize I'm probably in the minority with that, so take that for what it's worth. But Craig, I think it'll be a while before you see ByungHo Park again. He hit the disabled list, like I mentioned, and that's a 10-day disabled list in the minor leagues, as in the major leagues now, with the new collective bargaining agreement. But I guess your question was kind of 2 parts, right? You're not just talking about Park, you're wondering about who's expendable on the roster. Because what if Kenny Vargas comes up and becomes the Twins' everyday DH after starting the year in AAA Rochester? Well, then who goes? It's a fair question, but I'll preface this by saying that I asked Thad Levine last week, let's see, what day would that have been? On Thursday, I think. Yeah, on Thursday. Is this roster set in stone? I mean, not set in stone, but is this roster written in pen right now, or do you expect a lot of moving parts in the first month of the season, whether it's Kenny Vargas or ByungHo Park or another pitcher, like J.O. Barrios won International League Pitcher of the Week in the first week, so will you see roster turnover? And Levine said, no, I don't think we expect that right now. We just won 3 games in a row. And now advance that a little bit further. The Twins are 5-1. He said he doesn't expect a lot of roster turnover. So take that for what it's worth. But I think you could see Kenny Vargas at some point early in the season. And to me, when you ask who's expendable, if you're putting Santana and Grossman in the conversation, I don't think so. Because, I mean, to me, Robbie Grossman at least has one usable skill, which is getting on base against left-handed pitching. I think that the Twins will continue to use him as a DH against lefties, at least in the short term. And you could see him in the outfield every once in a while, too. I don't think you want his glove out there all the time, because Rosario clearly better in that department. But Rosario comes with his own question marks. But anyways, Danny Santana doesn't have a real usable skill set to me. The best thing you can say about him is that he's got a strong arm and he runs fast and he had one good offensive season. Really, like, his minor league track record wasn't even that impressive as a hitter. So I see Danny Santana as kind of like an extra player. With that being said, the Twins only have 3 players on their bench, and Paul Molitor loves positional flexibility. So Santana might be spared in that regard. He can play center field. He could play left or right field in a pinch. He's played some shortstop in his career. I bet you could put him at third base or second base. And not to say that you get great returns, but there'd be some positional flexibility there that's worth having. To me, the person or people that would come under scrutiny if a roster change were needed would be a pitcher. I mean, the Twins have 8 relievers in April, and sure, they've used them all, but they could be more efficient with their relievers, and you could ask your starters to go more. Adalberto Mejia had a short start. Irvin Santana was pulled after 6 innings the other day. I think that you could reasonably expect, if you wanted another bench player, like you ask about Park, I'm wondering about Vargas, I think you'd go pitcher so that you can keep the extra bench player and you can go to a 4-man bench instead of just having 3 guys out there. And when one of them's a catcher, you really don't have a lot of bench flexibility if you're Paul Molitor. So, Craig, good question, long rambling answer, but I think I'd look to cut down to 7 relievers, so a 12-man pitching staff, before I'd look to cut a bench player. Nick Griffin says Buxton is like Pedro Serrano. And then Nick also asks, isn't Vargas out of options? Let me just address the Vargas thing. Yeah, this is his final option year, but the way minor league options work is that to send him to Rochester in the first place, the Twins needed to use an option. And it's not just like a single option, like they hand in a card and then he's lost it. Once you use an option, that's an option year for a player, so you can send him up and down as many times as you'd like within the course of that year, and it only counts as one option. So Vargas is on his final option, but to me, there's no danger of calling him up to the big leagues. If you need to send him back, you just send him back because you've already used that option. Next year will be interesting for Kenny Vargas because if he's not going to make this team out of spring training, well, then he's got to be exposed to waivers, and we're getting way ahead of ourselves, cart before the horse, but that would be more interesting because Vargas, at least so far in his career, seems to me like the kind of player a team would take a chance on just to see if they could get some cheap power at first base or DH. So, yeah, he is out of options, but I wouldn't worry about that for roster moves. Park, it's a little bit different. Vargas is on the 40-man roster. Park is not, so that's kind of a big difference. And I see you say thanks, so Nick, it must mean you're still listening. So thanks for sticking around. That's a good question, and it's commonly misunderstood. But really, the only time I am super curious about options is in spring training, because a guy like Michael Tonkin, this year and last year, out of options, and so I look at that as like, I don't want to say it's a boost, like it helps his chances. The guy still has to make the team. But if it's a tiebreaker and one guy can be sent freely to the minor leagues and the other would be lost if you didn't take him on the roster, I think the choice becomes pretty clear. So that's a quick, in a nutshell, version of roster options and why they impact the 25-man. Craig says, with our DH being so weak, I'd almost rather play Escobar at third for better D and rotate Sano and Mauer at first and DH. Well, DH on the Twins right now, I don't view it as that weak. Robbie Grossman against lefties is a great option. He's like a career 380 on base percentage or something like that. Maybe that was his 2016 season, so I should pump the brakes on it. But he has been a really good hitter against lefties, and that's a valuable skill. So for the Twins to use that, I know you only face a lefty about a third of the time, but I think they've actually been okay there. The problem with playing Sano at DH, at least from people within the Twins front office that I've talked to this offseason, they want to challenge him more than that. They don't want him to think, oh, I'm a DH now, so weight doesn't matter, conditioning doesn't matter. The Twins view that stuff as important, and challenging him as a third baseman challenging him to stay fit, challenging him to stay focused. That's important in their mind. Now, I'm not here to argue whether that's right or wrong, but that's the way they see it. I talked with Sano in Fort Myers this spring, and he said, kind of flat out, he's sort of blunt about it. He said, I'm too young to be a DH. Like, if you DH him now, you're basically saying, okay, well, he's got no hope of ever playing defense. And I think the Twins are trying hard not to send that message. So whether he's a third baseman or a first baseman, they're trying to keep him engaged in the field. As for Mauer rotating in at DH, if it's against righties, sure, I'd be okay with that. But he's the Twins' best first baseman, so you'd be losing that. I mean, defensively. And then against lefties, I don't know that you'd want Mauer DHing. There's a lefty on the mound today, and Mauer's on the bench even after an off day yesterday. So to me, that shows you, unless he's hurt and I missed something, which is totally possible because I'm not on the road trip, that says to me what the Twins think of Mauer against lefties. He's going to sit on the bench sometimes against tough left-handed matchups. I wrote that in November, and I took some heat for it, saying like you've either got to bench Mauer full-time or he's got to be in the lineup all the time. I just don't think that's true. The way I look at it is each hitter really is two different hitters. There's the guy he is against right-handed pitching and the guy he is against left-handed pitching. For Mauer, those are two different guys, and the right-handed matchup is much better for Joe Mauer, and he's a valuable hitter, and you want him in the top 3-4 spots in your batting order, and that's totally fine. Against lefties, you want to hide him a little bit. That's the sad reality that Mauer, who was a former superstar, that's just not who he is anymore. So you have to treat Mauer you have to treat him as the guy he is in 2017, and I think that's going to be hiding him against some left-handers, giving him more off days, mixing in some rest days. So I guess, Craig, I could see them shuffling something at DH. Like, I kind of suspect Kenny Vargas will be up in the first 2 months of the season. You'll see him take over the DH role at some point. But I don't think I'd go to a rotation of strictly Mauer and Sano because I'm not sure the upgrade to Escobar at third base is that significant. Like, maybe I'm too down on Escobar as a fielder, but he's just not that trustworthy to me. Like, he's got better range than Sano. His arm's not as good as Sano. But we've seen him play shortstop. If he could play shortstop with any degree of certainty, he'd be the Twins' shortstop. I mean, he's lost that job, 3 times now? He's been given a chance to run with it, and his bat's been there in spurts. He's an okay hitter. He's fine. He's got some power off the bench. But Escobar, in my mind, as much as I like the guy, he's an extra player. And I'm trying to think what roster scenario would make a lot of sense to have him the third baseman and just sort of give up on the Sano experiment. I kind of think the Twins should keep going with the Sano at third base experiment for a while. Like, I would probably go with it the full season. Just see what a full year of playing third base in the majors looks like for Sano, and then make your decision about the future this winter. I don't think your hand is forced in that to give up on that experiment right now. So anyways, that was a good question, and it got me off onto a long and rambling tangent, so you can tell that the caffeine is working. It looks like we got one more question here, and if no more come in, I'm going to duck out of here and go watch the game at the 1500 ESPN studios. So Tori asks, is Irvin Santana the ace of the staff this year or a different starter? Well, like, Santana's going to be their ace. Here's the question about Santana. Thank you for the question, Tori. The question in my mind about Santana isn't whether he's their best pitcher. I think he's easily their best pitcher. It's, will he be pitching for the Twins in September? Because if you're rebuilding, let's just say that the Twins aren't in contention. They might be, so this might be all for naught. But if the Twins are not in contention in July, it makes an awful lot of sense to me to shop a guy like Irvin Santana. He's got 2 years left on his deal with a buyout option for a third year. I won't get into the contract details, but if you're curious, just ask me about it on Facebook. Be happy to share that stuff with you, why I think it makes sense. But basically 2 years and $28 million. That's kind of what you need to know. And so if you're a contender looking for a mid-rotation starter at the trade deadline, you could do worse than Irvin Santana. I don't think you'd have to give up a lot in terms of prospects compared with, like, say, Jose Quintana. He's been a widely rumored pitcher on the trade block since the White Sox dealt Chris Sale, frankly. And that would cost a team a lot, I'm guessing, because he's cost-controlled, he's excellent, he's left-handed. A lot of things working in the White Sox favor on Quintana. Not so much on the Twins front with Ervin Santana. So my point there is that the cost would just be a little bit lower. But if you're a contender and you lose your third starter, let's say, in the summer, you lost one of your guys who you were expecting to start a postseason game for you. I think you could go trade for Ervin Santana and make a run at it. He's not going to be the ace of a contender, but you could start Game 3 of the ALDS or NLDS for some club. I don't see why that would be too big of a stretch. Santana, I think he's poised for a good year. So we'll see what happens as it kind of unfolds, but so far so good for the Twins ace. And we'll see if he's in a Twins uniform in September. Anyways, looks like no more questions coming in. If I missed any, if I just don't see them on my phone here, sorry. I'll get to them. I promise. I'll go log in on my Facebook account, Derek Wetmore MLB, and I'll answer those questions as much as I can. And as I say that, one comes in, I will answer this and then I'll run. If you're on this video, though, and you like Twins analysis, check out the Touch 'Em All podcast. Phil Mackey and I just recorded one. You can find that on iTunes, or I use the Podcast Republic app on my phone. That's where I get my Touch 'Em All podcasts. We talked Twins for like 60 solid minutes yesterday. A lot of Buxton analysis, and there's some nerdy stuff in there. I'll admit to it. So check that out if you want more Twins talk. You can find that wherever you get podcasts, and that will be my parting shot for the day. So, last question, and then we got to get out of here. Jesse says, does Nick Gordon have any chance to get a call-up if he continues to hit well? Or does he ultimately go through AAA first, and we're looking at a year plus when the Twins have more of a need? It's a good question, and my only answer, and this is going to sound like a cop-out. I'm sorry, I don't mean it that way. I have no idea how the Twins brain trust currently views player promotion. I know some of the people that are held over from the old regime and how they view player promotion, but I just don't have a sense yet for, well, will Thad Levine get involved in those conversations? Will Derek Falvey get involved in those conversations? Or are they basically leaving the farm system to a guy like Brad Stile, who runs that side of things for the Twins and has for a couple of years? I have no idea how that's going to work yet under their new regime, which is why some of this stuff's so interesting and new and fresh. Even for me, I cover the team pretty closely, or at least I try to, and I don't have these answers right now. So it's new, it's interesting. This will be a fun summer from that regard to try to figure out how they view those. My guess, Jesse, I'm guessing you won't see Nick Gordon in 2017 in the big leagues. Nice start, fine, but keep in mind, it's a very small sample size. Some players get hot early. We'll see where he settles. He'll seek his level over the summer, I'm sure, but I'm just guessing here, unless the Jorge Polanco at shortstop experiment is like a total unmitigated disaster, I don't think you would see Nick Gordon. I think he'd go through AAA Rochester first. I think you'll see Nick Gordon in 2018. Maybe not to start the year. I don't know. You'd have to ask somebody more well-versed in minor leagues than me. But I think it would be a stretch to expect to see the Twins' top prospect this year. But who knows? I've been wrong a lot in the past, so take that for what it's worth. Thanks for the questions, everybody. Thanks for dropping by. Check out the Touch 'Em All podcast on iTunes or Podcast One or 1500ESPN.com. Until next week's Coffee Q&A, cheers.